Hello, in this video I am going to show you a solution for exercise 32 or exercise 1 in chapter 32. And I've already begun working on this, as you can see, and what I did is I began by building the user interface. And just to kind of refresh our memories a little bit, I'm going to jump over to my browser so we can take a look at what this needs to do. So we need an interface that looks similar to this. And this particular interface can really kind of be broken down into a few different areas. Certainly we're going to need all the standard things like a stage and a scene, and then we're going to need a few different areas to declare. So one will be an area where we're going to place our buttons. Notice up here at the top they have a little snippet of text, and we're going to put that in its own little area. And then we have the center part of the screen that has all the text fields, and notice how they're arranged in rows with labels in front of them. So with that goal in mind, I went ahead and created some things here. And I'm going to actually first show you a couple of things as I'm building it. First of all, I went through and I added components. So for example, I have all the text fields I need, and you can see how I named them to match up with the form. I actually put in a generic label, and that is the little part that's going to sit at the top of the screen. They're showing you a result here. I'm actually starting with a little snippet of text that just says pending query, but it could actually be blank or whatever message you want in there. And then I also created the 4 buttons. Now notice here I have a little line of code that I am going to be uncommenting shortly, but that's going to hold our query statement. Also notice that I still have my override in there. And then I begin my start method. Now, if you take a look at how I have this laid out, and feel free to copy it if you want, but basically I created a few different structures. So the one thing that I have here is I created a vertical box, a V box, and then I created an H box, and then notice that I actually have a series of H boxes. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And what that corresponds with are 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 rows. So we have horizontal boxes, each one with their own identity. And you can see that each one of them will hold a combination of a label and a text field. This one will have 3 labels and a text field, and so on. Okay. Now notice that that V box that I set up is actually going to grab all of those boxes and put them inside. So this whole area that holds all the fields and labels, that's one V box, and that contains 5 H boxes. In addition, I also set up a button box, which you can guess that sets up all the buttons at the bottom. I also set up obviously our scene and our stage like we normally do. And I set up also a border pane, and that border pane is going to be responsible for holding all the other stuff. Now notice that the center section obviously holds the V box with all the H boxes inside of it, and then I have the button box set to the bottom. And then up at the top, I didn't really declare a V box or an H box or anything. I just directly dropped the label called status in there. With that all in place, I then am able to actually test the user interface. So if I hit my play button here, you can see that it comes up on screen just fine. Now, I do have a little bit of an issue here. This could be sized to something smaller, but my main concern here is just to make it work, and I'm not really so concerned about making it perfectly pretty. It's the interaction with the database that's the key thing here. So let's go ahead and close that, and let's move on now to creating some more stuff. Now, as I indicated before, since we're interfacing with a database, I am going to uncomment this statement, and all I'm doing is I'm setting up a variable to hold our SQL statement, and notice that it's got its own type in there, so it's built upon a parent object that we're pulling from. All right, the next step is now to get all the database connectivity working and have the buttons actually do some work for us. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to drop in this code here. And you can see that I'm calling upon a few methods that I have not yet created. And the first one I'm pulling in is the Initialize Database. And that is the spot where we're going to create our connection string to interface with the database. And you should have learned how to do that from the previous videos and your readings. And then we're going to take each one of the 4 buttons and we're going to assign a event handler that will then point to these particular actions. All right, so you may be asking yourself, why am I initializing the database down here? Well, the simple answer is we want to get all the visual components on the screen first before somebody goes clicking a button and isn't able to do something. So you got to show it first, we initialize our database, then we enable the buttons to do something. So we don't want to change that. You got to remember that we're still working in a top-down order as we walk through our code. Our next task is going to be to set up this particular method. So I kind of have it slightly pre-created thanks to our author. But you notice that the connection string that he's got set up here is not going to work with the stuff that we have. I'm also going to strike his comments here just to save a little bit of screen space. And then I'm going to go grab from my other screen here the connection information that I have. So basically the part that I'm going to be replacing is the MySQL component. And I'm just copying that over. Make sure I'm grabbing the right part here. And this is my statement. So that is actually part of this particular method. So it's a get connection. We talked about how to work with this and work with your own individual database. Then you will put in your username and password, but you have to be connecting to it, and you also have to have pre-created that database as we discussed in previous videos. All right, so then we're throwing in a couple extra things here. One to basically show that, first of all, we are actually connected to the database. That's going to come up in the console, so it's not going to show in the graphical application. And then we're also going to show in the label at the top of the form that we are connected, so we're repeating the message twice. And then this particular area here is where we are going to populate our statement, and notice that calls a method called createStatement. All of this is placed inside of a try catch, and that is just in case the connection does not work. We'll be able, to get some sort of a feedback on it. Now I'm noticing here that looks like we have a couple of libraries that we're missing, and of course right now it says the connection cannot be resolved, and I guess I'm more concerned right now about the libraries that we might be missing. All right, and you can see just by clicking on it, it discovered the resource that it needed and added a library. All right, the next thing that we're going to do now is we're going to add each one of these actions as separate methods. And I'm going to drop in the first one, and this one is the view. And you can see I left all of these comments in here to hopefully clarify a few things for you. Now, I want to make note here that I'm copying this from previous solution sets, so some of these things might not match up name-wise. And I'm just double checking up top here that my text field for ID is named the same, and it's not. I have a lowercase d in mine, not a capital. So you can see how that resolved itself right away. All right, and then what we're doing here is we're going to just create a query. You can see we're putting in the information we need, and this is just to view. So we're going to select everything from staff where the ID equals whatever it's going to be, and that is what we type in. And then if you're wondering, obviously the get text is going to get the text from the text field, but trim, what that does is it removes any leading or following spaces that somebody might happen to type in. And honestly, you really don't need that there. It's just, considered a good practice, basically. Once again, I see that we might have some libraries here that we need. So I'm just going to the end, control space. And I just want to make sure I'm pulling in the right one. I think that's the right one. We'll find out if it's not. Okay. Oh, looks like it didn't stick. Actually, I think this is the right one. We'll find out. I guess we'll find out as we run it. So I'm not too concerned with that at the moment. Not a big deal. Now let's pull in our next thing. And if you didn't notice, the one that we just dropped in has a little catch to it, and that's not an intentional joke. It just happened to work out that way. Where we are going to take the result sets. In other words, we're going to execute the query based upon the statement. It's going to store the results here, and then here it's going to say load to text field. So we're setting up a separate method that's going to take those results, and it's going to populate all the text fields that we have above. And now, once again, because I'm copying this from a previous iteration, I'm just making sure that I named all my text fields the same so it actually does work. Of course, it would have underlined if not, but never hurts to check. All right, so if, and remember, this is going to go result by result. So it's going to go to the next one and pull one in. It's going to go through and pull in the stuff that's there, and if it succeeds, it's going to change the text at the top. If it fails, it's going to change the text at the top to this. So hopefully that makes sense to you. The next thing that I'm going to drop in there is the insert. And we'll just take a real quick look at that, and you can follow this. Here's my ID issue once again. And basically, this is just the syntax once again. SQL statement taking all the values that we're getting from the text, trimmed down, and separating them all with commas and dropping that stuff into the database based upon what's in the form when you run it. All right. And then, of course, we have a little try catch here and a success statement. All right. Next one we're going to throw in is update. And update will take a record that pre-exists and adjust whatever content. Now notice that you are doing another statement here, and we're using the SQL update command where it's going to go through each one of these. Once again, the ID is off. It's a good thing we know that. And then it's going to allow us to change whichever value we're changing on the form. So you got to remember, if we're going to update something, that also means that the record's also populated into the fields first. Then we go into the field, adjust something, and then when we hit the update button, it will change just the one that's changed. And really what it's doing is it's reading everything back in before it does it. Another one that we have to throw in, and I think it's our last one if I'm not mistaken, is a clear. So let's drop that in. And you can see what this one does is just very simply goes through each text field. And notice what it does, it sets the text to null. Now another approach is you can set it to empty strings, but that actually has a value. Setting it to null actually clears the record. So that's a distinction there. Now I think I have a couple things underlined in here that I want to try to resolve before I run it. All right, but see what happens is I changed that and it doesn't like my syntax on some other stuff. And I'm actually going to try to run it and see what error it throws at me, and I'm thinking it might just be a missing import statement. Yeah, I know that I'm missing something in here. So right now I'm doing a comparison with the stuff that I see. Okay, there's two of them that I see that are missing, and one of them is the results set. So it does come from the regular SQL library, not the MySQL. So that was where we were having a little issue there. And the other one is the connection. And I'm just going to throw that in right here. All right, that looks good. And that, notice all the little underlines are, or the red marks are gone from the side. And now this should run. Let's give it a shot and see if we're successful. So there's our application. But notice that it's, oh yes, that's right. What's going on is the password I have listed here is not my actual password. So I'm going to pause the video and put my real password in for a moment. All right, so now I have the correct password placed, and we're going to try to run it again. And you see database connected. There's our message. And at this point, I'm trying to think of what information to put in there. And I guess I'm going to have to look at some of the information that's in the database to be able to do a query. So I'm going to pause the video once again and pull up some real data that we can work with. All right, and then I'm hoping that this information in screen here is correct. So I'm going to go back to the running form, and I'm just going to type in when it says record not found. Well, isn't that helpful? Well, why don't we create a record? You guys love it when I do this, right? And the record was inserted. Clear works. And the one that I think is not working correctly might be the view statement. All right, and I'm just looking at the console to see if everything's going okay. All right, I just terminated the application, and I'm going to work on trying to get that view to work. But I think probably the big catch there is making sure that we're working with the data as intended. But you have all the basic code, and that's the solution. So hopefully you'll get yours working too, and then turn it in. Okay, good luck with it.